In a palace bound by ancient traditions and whispered obedience, one royal dared to defy the crown not out of arrogance, but principle. When Queen Camilla introduced a chilling new protocol demanding deference beyond precedent, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, refused to bend the knee. What followed was a confrontation that shook Buckingham Palace to its core and revealed fractures no one dared to acknowledge until now. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The story begins quietly, almost deceptively so, in the hushed corridors of Buckingham and Sandringham, where whispers carry farther than shouts. A new directive was being passed among royal staff protocol Clarion, a name that sounded formal, procedural, and harmless to the untrained eye. But within those walls, where every rule carries centuries of weight, this protocol was anything but ordinary. Camilla, now seated firmly beside the king as queen consort, had introduced a requirement that would redefine internal royal hierarchy. Every senior royal, regardless of age, rank, or tenure, was to bow to her personally, both in private and in public settings. It was a gesture meant to symbolize unity and respect, or so the official explanation claimed. But to those closest to the situation, it felt like something else entirely. A declaration of supremacy. Royal aides, known for their discretion, found themselves speaking in tightly coded murmurs. The existence of Protocol Clarion was not intended for public eyes, and yet it seemed to leak almost as soon as it was introduced. Small snippets of conversations slipped into the hands of carefully selected journalists, hinting that something was shifting inside the monarchy. And it was during a private family gathering at Sandringham that the quiet tension finally came to a point of ignition. It happened without theatrics, without raised voices. Those who witnessed it claimed the atmosphere itself seemed to freeze. Camilla entered the room, expecting what had now become a mandatory gesture, but Sophie did not bow. She did not hesitate, stutter, or consult her husband with her eyes. She simply stood with the calm, steady composure that had defined her for decades. She looked at Camilla not with rebellion, but with unmistakable dignity. A bow may acknowledge authority, her silence seemed to say, but respect must be earned, not commanded. For a moment, the room held its breath. Camilla's expression changed not instantly and not dramatically, but with a tightening around the eyes that conveyed more than words ever could. And then, without speaking to Sophie or acknowledging anyone else present, the Queen turned and left the room. Some described the moment as icy. Others called it inevitable. What no one expected was what happened next. Word spread within the palace faster than any official announcement ever could. Staff, advisors, even extended members of the family found themselves discussing Sophie not as the quiet, dutiful royal she had long been perceived as, but as a figure of stillness against a rising storm. Her refusal had not only broken the protocol, it had exposed the fragile balance of power beneath the crown. But to understand why Sophie's refusal cut so deeply, we must unravel the growing storm behind Camilla's sudden quest for dominance. For years, Camilla lived beneath the ghostly shadow of Diana, a figure etched into the national memory with almost divine reverence. Every public smile Camilla offered was met with whispers, every wave compared to another woman's grace. No matter how polished her pearls or how regal her bearing, she could never quite silence the memory that haunted every royal hall she entered. But something changed after the coronation. The moment she stood beside Charles, crowned queen consort in name and presence, a flicker of steel appeared behind her gaze. That crown wasn't just ceremonial. It was armor. The years of restraint began to crack, revealing a woman no longer content to merely exist in the margins of monarchy. She had worn patience like a mask, but now it was time to be seen, fully, undeniably, without question. What followed wasn't chaos, but precision, a methodical restructuring of palace dynamics that insiders later described as calculated. Camilla began to redraw the map of influence. Titles were scrutinized, public roles re-evaluated, aides reassigned. Suddenly, decisions that once trickled through committees were coming directly from her private office. It wasn't the act of a woman hungry for attention, It was the move of a queen who believed she had waited long enough. And then came Protocol Clarion, a name as ominous as its implications. The directive, quietly delivered to senior courtiers, demanded visible deference not just from the public but from her own family. No longer would courtesy be symbolic. A bow, a nod, a physical acknowledgement of her authority was now the expectation regardless of bloodline or personal rank. It was a rule dressed as respect, but beneath it simmered something more primal, a need to erase doubt, to silence the ghost of the woman whose shadow had suffocated her for decades. Inside the palace, the reaction was muted but palpable. Senior royals shifted uncomfortably, whispers travelling faster than couriers. Some tried to ignore the shift, others complied, unsure of the consequences if they didn't, but none dared to challenge it, not openly, not until Sophie. To Camilla, Sophie's refusal was more than just an insult. It was betrayal, an act of humiliation delivered not in fury, but calm, principled defiance. And that stung deeper than rage ever could. This wasn't just a political roadblock. It was personal. Camilla had spent decades earning her place, clawing her way through scandal and scorn. And just when she had it all, the crown, the control, the acknowledgement, Sophie shattered the illusion of complete acceptance with a single word. No. There was fury behind palace walls, but no explosion. Camilla didn't scream. She recalibrated. Quiet punishments began to take form. Invitations withheld, appearances cancelled. The queen consort was not about to let her authority unravel before it had even fully taken root, but Sophie had already become something more than a dissenter. She had become a symbol, not of rebellion but of integrity. And while Camilla was determined to stamp out resistance, the royal family was learning something it hadn't expected. That Sophie's silence had always been power in disguise. Yet Sophie's decision wasn't born in a vacuum. Her past reveals a long, painful history of being underestimated, sidelined, and now challenged to her core. For decades, Sophie played the quiet game, loyal, dutiful, always out of the spotlight. But behind that silence was a woman hardened by grief, betrayal, and sacrifice. While others clawed for attention, Sophie earned respect. And now, she's drawing the line. Not for herself, but for the monarchy she believes in. Sophie didn't marry into royalty with tabloid fanfare or public obsession. She stepped into the royal sphere as a woman from a modest background, a commoner in title but not in dignity. From the beginning, she was scrutinized, dismissed, and underestimated. The palace, steeped in centuries of unspoken codes and rigid expectations, wasn't welcoming to outsiders, especially not one so quiet, so unwilling to play the fame game. But Sophie didn't fight back with noise. She endured, she observed. And in time, she proved herself not through grandeur, but through grit. The media tore at her character, twisted her image, and tried to push her to the edge. But she never broke. Even when tragedy struck, when she suffered a heartbreaking miscarriage that was both personal agony and public spectacle, she carried on, head high, voice steady. Her pain became armor. Her silence, strength. Over time, that quiet strength earned her more than survival, it earned her trust. Queen Elizabeth II, ever wary of those who chased headlines, saw in Sophie something rare. Humility, integrity, a mirror of her own resolve. As the years passed, Sophie became one of the Queen's most reliable confidantes. Not loud, not political, but always present. The Queen once described her as my rock, and within the family, that meant everything. She stood beside the monarchy, not above it, not against it. She wasn't trying to change the system, only to honor it with grace. But after the Queen's death, the balance shifted. Camilla rose, and with her came a new hierarchy. Suddenly, Sophie's quiet loyalty didn't matter. Her history, her service, her sacrifice, it was all forgotten. The inner circle shrank, and Sophie found herself pushed to the periphery once more. But this time, Sophie didn't accept her erasure. When Camilla unveiled the new protocol, demanding public and private bows of deference, Sophie recognized it for what it was, not tradition, but domination. She refused, not out of pride, but out of duty. Not to herself, but to the memory of the queen who had trusted her. This wasn't rebellion, it was remembrance, it was reclamation. By saying no, Sophie wasn't just protecting her own dignity, she was defending the very spirit of the monarchy that had nurtured her, the monarchy Elizabeth had built, and in that moment, her voice so long subdued rang louder than ever before. But inside the gilded walls of Windsor and Buckingham, power is never given freely, and Camilla wasn't about to let Sophie's defiance go unpunished. The royals rarely strike with swords, retribution comes in whispers, exclusions, and sealed envelopes. After Sophie's defiance, Camilla's retaliation was swift and clinical. Events vanished, invitations were revoked, and for the first time in years, Sophie's name disappeared from official briefings. This wasn't just exclusion. It was exile by protocol. It began quietly, like all palace punishments do. Event organizers, many of whom had worked with Sophie for decades, received discreet phone calls from Camilla'S aides, urging them to reconsider guest lists. Phrases like optics, priorities, and Queen's preference were floated as cover, but the message was unmistakable. Sophie was no longer a fixture. Overnight, she went from representing the crown on international platforms to being absent entirely. Her upcoming diplomatic tour, a goodwill mission long in the works, was abruptly reassigned, and not to a senior royal, but to Princess Beatrice. The move stunned insiders and humiliated Sophie. There was no explanation, no apology. Just a substitution. Deliberate. Symbolic. Soon after, the press turned. Like a tide that had been waiting to rise, stories began to surface, not scandalous, but corrosive. Tabloids painted Sophie as distant, aloof, even resentful. Quotes appeared from unnamed insiders questioning her commitment and warmth. It was a narrative sculpted with precision, not explosive, but eroding. Royal watchers began to connect the dots, especially after Sophie was notably absent from not one, but two major royal garden parties. These weren't casual oversights, they were strategic omissions, and the silence from the palace was deafening. No denials, no explanations, just airbrushed absence. Privately, palace staff whispered of a grey listing, an internal practice long rumoured but rarely spoken aloud. A technique used not to punish publicly, but to erase gradually. Diana had once endured it. Meghan too. Now it was Sophie's turn. The corridors she had once walked with quiet dignity grew colder. Communications dried up. Schedules became conflicted. And while the royal family maintained its polished facade in public, insiders say a chill settled behind the scenes. Only Prince Edward, steadfast and loyal, continued to advocate for her, but his voice was drowned in a sea of orchestrated indifference. Still, Sophie said nothing. No statements, no retaliation. Her silence, once her strength, was now weaponized against her. But beneath the surface, something was shifting, because Sophie was not as alone as she appeared. Her quiet endurance had earned her something more valuable than attention respect. And while Camilla sought to isolate her, not everyone within the palace was willing to fall in line. Yet even as she endured this silent siege, Sophie was not without allies, and some of them sat closer to the throne than Camilla anticipated. In the palace game of survival, unexpected alliances are forged in whispers and glances. And Sophie, stoic and serene, had quietly gained allies in high places. When Prince William stepped into the shadows, offering silent support, a new front in the royal, a war quietly opened. This wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about legacy and lines in the sand. William had watched the fallout carefully, not as a passive observer, but as a future king. He understood the monarchy's delicate balance, how one wrong move could fracture trust inside and outside the palace walls. Camilla's protocol shift was more than a power play. It was a reordering of loyalty. It forced the family to choose who they were aligning themselves with, the monarchy they inherited or the one being engineered. And William, who had lived through emotional wars beneath golden ceilings, recognized the danger of allowing personal insecurity to shape royal authority. To him, Sophie's refusal wasn't rebellion. It was clarity, a refusal to let tradition be weaponized. So he supported her not publicly, not loudly, but unmistakably. He ensured she was included in private strategic discussions. He allowed her presence to carry weight, and in a monarchy where presence is everything, that was no small act. Kate, too, understood the stakes. Her relationship with Sophie had always been marked by quiet ease, two women who knew what it meant to navigate the press, expectations, and silent judgment. While others backed away from Sophie, Kate reached out. Invitations, calls, shared engagements that appeared casual, but in the royal world, nothing is casual. Kate's support signaled something critical. Sophie was not alone, and that shift was noticed. When Kate and Sophie appeared side by side, calm, composed, graceful, the message was subtle but unmistakable: solidarity. But this alliance came at a cost. Charles, already fragile under the weight of perception and duty, found himself caught between loyalty to his wife and responsibility to the institution he had vowed to protect. And whispers began circulating that he was prioritizing Camilla's emotional comfort over royal unity. Those whispers weren't loud, but they were persistent. William and Charles found themselves at odds in private discussions, not in shouts, but in pauses, in tones, in what was left unsaid. And Prince Edward, ever devoted to his wife, tried to bridge the widening gap. He met with Charles more than once, requesting fairness, reconsideration, compromise, but every attempt was met with silence or polite dismissal. The decision had been made. Camilla would not yield, and so the rift grew. Behind closed doors, a new alignment took shape, a quiet inner circle forming around Sophie. Not because she sought leadership, but because she represented something priceless: steadiness, principle. A reminder of a monarchy built on duty rather than ego. And as Sophie's quiet influence began to rise again, Camilla felt it. Not as a rumor, but as a tightening in the room when she entered. As conversations that paused just a fraction too long. As glances exchanged, not in defiance, but in recognition. She was being edged out, not officially, not visibly, but emotionally, and perhaps that was the deepest insult of all. But just as the alliance solidified, a shocking royal confrontation brought years of buried resentment exploding to the surface. It wasn't meant to happen, not like this. In the drawing room of Windsor Castle, in front of key royals, Sophie and Camilla finally collided. Words were spoken that cannot be unsaid. Lines were crossed, and the monarchy, so often preserved through silence, was now witnessing its fracture in real time. It began with a strategy, meeting a routine gathering to finalize upcoming royal appearances. The atmosphere, already tense from weeks of quiet division, turned volatile when Camilla shifted the conversation towards standards of respect. She spoke pointedly, her words hanging in the air like a challenge, referencing the importance of visible loyalty in royal conduct. Everyone in the room understood what she meant. It was about Sophie, about her refusal. And in that moment, the dam broke. Sophie, who had endured months of silent exile and carefully orchestrated smears, rose from her seat not to argue, but to assert. With measured fury, she questioned not just the demand for respect, but the legitimacy of the one demanding it. Her voice, usually calm and composed, now cut through the room with a sharp edge. She challenged the idea that loyalty could be coerced, that authority could be manufactured through mandates. And more than that, she accused Camilla of rewriting the monarchy not to preserve it, but to reshape it in her own image. The room froze. Prince Edward looked away. Kate lowered her eyes, and King Charles, visibly shaken, attempted to intervene. But Sophie didn't stop. Her monologue, blistering and unrelenting, exposed the rot behind the protocol, the manipulation, the control, the vanishing unity. Charles tried to calm the storm with platitudes about family and duty, but his words landed weakly in the heavy silence. Then, in a moment of quiet, Rebellion, William stood up. He didn't speak. He didn't argue. He simply left the room. And in doing so, sent a message more powerful than any speech. His absence struck harder than presence, and it was Camilla who felt it most. Camilla's face reportedly twisted with fury. Sources say she stood abruptly, her voice rising with a declaration that echoed off the ancient stone walls. "She has defied me for the last time." With that, the Queen Consort stormed out. The meeting, once meant to symbolize cooperation, had become a declaration of war. The fracture was no longer theoretical, it was real. It had a voice, a witness, and now consequences. But even as the confrontation echoed through royal halls, the outside world was beginning to take notice, leading to an unexpected public twist. The palace tried to bury the story, but the public had already chosen their queen of principle. Support for Sophie surged. Suddenly, what began as a quiet protest became a cultural flashpoint. And Camilla? She found herself facing something no royal training prepares you for: a crisis of legitimacy. The moment whispers of the Windsor confrontation leaked, no one knew exactly how or by whom the internet ignited. Clips, commentary threads, speculative timelines, and insider claims spread like wildfire. Hashtags rose overnight. Number stand with Sophie. Number respect is earned. And the one that hit the hardest. Number not my queen consort. What had been a private palace fracture was now a public reckoning. Sophie, who had never asked for attention, became the symbol of quiet dignity in the face of imposed authority. Her years of steady service, her compassion, her consistent presence during national grief and celebration, all of it resurfaced in the public memory. Meanwhile, Camilla found herself on the opposite side of the narrative, cast not as a queen of continuity, but as a ruler clutching power too tightly. Commentators on morning shows spoke carefully, too carefully to be accidental, about leadership styles and tones of influence, while former palace staff, never bold enough to speak outright, began to phrase their memories differently. Sophie was always kind, one said. Always gracious, said another. The subtext was unmistakable. Crowds noticed. At public events, applause told the truth before statements ever could. Sophie appeared rarely, cautiously, and the crowd roared louder than protocol expected. Camilla appeared and something quieter settled in the air. Not disrespect, but distance. A cooling. A shift. Polling data followed, and it was stark. Approval ratings that once held steady for Camilla began to slide, while Sophie's numbers surged. Her refusal, once seen as internal friction, had become a message the public embraced. Respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned. This was the moment Buckingham Palace moved into damage control mode. Press releases softened language. Family, unity became the headline phrase. Photo ops were arranged, Camilla smiling, Sophie serene, but the public saw through the choreography. The tide had already turned. Sophie had not simply resisted. She had awakened something. The question was no longer who held the title, but who held the moral authority that title implied. But even as Sophie gained the people's favour, another twist was brewing behind palace doors, one that would test her loyalty to the very institution she had defended. Desperate to contain the fallout, King Charles summoned Sophie for a private meeting. What he offered her was stunning. Full restoration of her duties, prime appearances, and a private apology, but only if she signed a confidentiality agreement and agreed to bow. This was no longer about protocol. It was a test of submission. Would Sophie betray her truth for power? The invitation came quietly, hand-delivered, bearing no official crest, just a request. Highgrove was chosen deliberately, far from palace whispers and press cameras. Charles wasn't seeking spectacle. He was seeking control. For weeks, the monarchy had been destabilized by the silent storm surrounding Sophie. Public sentiment had tilted dramatically, headlines favoring dignity over dominion. Camilla's image had taken a beating, and palace courtiers were scrambling to restore equilibrium. In private, Charles was weary. Not angry. not cold, but determined to stop the bleeding. And for that, he needed Sophie to yield. The offer was laid out with the care of diplomacy and the sharpness of strategy, a return to full duties, prominent visibility, an unspoken acknowledgement of the wrongs she'd endured. But in exchange, she had to agree to two things: a legal silence and symbolic submission. The non-disclosure agreement was thick, reportedly covering not just the Windsor confrontation, but future discussions of internal conduct. But it was the second condition that struck deeper: a bow not in public, but just in private before Camilla. A moment meant not for cameras, but for domination. Charles insisted it was symbolic, a path to peace. But Sophie understood it for what it was: a demand to erase her defiance. Witnesses say Sophie was emotional, eyes heavy not with fear but resolve. She listened, she nodded, but when the moment came to sign, she laid the pen down. She would not bow, she would not forget, she would not trade silence for reinstatement. The king, stunned by her steadfast refusal, allegedly closed the meeting with chilling finality. "Then you leave me no choice." And with that, the quiet purge resumed. Her name was struck from the upcoming Commonwealth itinerary. Her schedule wiped clean. The monarchy had made its move, but Sophie wasn't finished, not by a long shot. What she did next would leave the monarchy breathless and redefine her legacy forever. No royal dares go rogue until one does. In a rare and unsanctioned interview, Sophie broke every rule. She didn't name names. She didn't need to. Her words were fire wrapped in velvet, and when the world heard them, something shifted. This wasn't just rebellion, it was a reckoning. It was supposed to be a simple appearance at a veterans' charity event, nothing official, nothing grand. But as Sophie stepped forward to speak, there was a gravity in the air that no one could quite explain. There were no palace handlers, no pre-approved statements, no carefully polished messaging. Just Sophie, standing in front of those who had given so much in silence, ready to finally give voice to her truth. She didn't attack. She didn't blame. Instead, she chose a single sentence that pierced through the veneer of royal composure like a blade. Respect is not demanded. It's earned. The room stilled. The cameras clicked. And in that moment, everything changed. The quote spread like wildfire. Social media erupted, and within hours, hashtags like #StandWithSophie and #NotMyQueenConsort were trending in nearly every major country. Commentators who once towed the royal line began raising quiet but sharp questions. Even former palace insiders began to speak out carefully, anonymously suggesting that Sophie had done what others only dreamed of, standing up without burning down the entire institution. She had become something larger than a duchess. She was now a symbol, a movement. As the days unfolded, something even more extraordinary occurred. Crowds began to shift. At public appearances, Camilla was greeted with polite applause, diluted, distant, no longer reverent. Meanwhile, Sophie's presence drew roars. Chants, banners, petitions surfaced demanding her full reinstatement, calling her the future queen we deserved. International media picked up the firestorm, no longer treating this as internal royal politics, but as a cultural divide, a monarchy at war with itself. Reports from inside Buckingham Palace spoke of chaos. Camilla, once emboldened, now appeared, increasingly guarded. Charles, silent and withdrawn. And yet, Sophie? She remained unshaken. Her quiet revolution wasn't about power. It was about principle. In refusing to kneel, she forced the world to look up. And in doing so, she gave voice to those silenced by fear, duty, or decorum. The palace's refusal to comment only deepened the public's curiosity. It wasn't just that Sophie had defied the crown, it was that she had done so with grace, with restraint, and with a purpose no one could ignore. And so, in a monarchy obsessed with tradition, it was Sophie's refusal, not her obedience, that ignited a revolution. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.